Welcome back to the Wargrew, and in today's video we're going to be doing a tier list for all of the Ogor Mawtribes units. I'm sad to say, but a good portion of them are a little bit on the weak side, either because they are overcosted or are just generally the rules are not very good. That doesn't mean that Ogor Mawtribes can't succeed in Age of Sigmar 3.0, but it's just going to be a little harder for them to use certain units. But we'll go over that as we get going. Before we get started, a little bit of bookkeeping. As with all tier lists, it is fairly arbitrary. This is mostly an opinion piece and just kind of my personal viewings on how all of the Ogor Mawtribes units stand against each other and against the greater meta in Age of Sigmar 3.0. Additionally, this video is dedicated to one of our very active Discord members. He has been a great help, and I kind of wanted to give a little shout out to him. So if you're seeing this, thank you so much for being awesome on the Discord. Without further ado, let's get started. So, like all my other faction tier lists, these are the units that I will be covering. I will be ignoring any specialty game or legends units, as they are just not supported or are kind of niche. So if you want to see what units are being covered in this, you can pause the video now. First up in the bottom tier is only one unit, and that is the Knoblars Scrap Launcher. Overall, I think this unit just sucks in every way. Like, I don't see any use for this thing ever. It has really bad stats, it has virtually no rend, and it's incredibly expensive for what you get. If you really want an artillery piece, get the other variant, the Iron Blaster. It's the same kit as far as I'm aware, but it's significantly better. I would never ever get a Knoblars Scrap Launcher. In tier 3, to start out the list, we got a Husk Guard on Thunder Tusk. This is just kind of a running theme you're going to be seeing. The Thunder Tusks are all pretty meh. They're fine, but why would I take a Thunder Tusk when Stonehorns exist? It's just kind of like they're worse in every regard to their counterpart, the Stonehorn. And if you're going to be paying the price of Thunder Tusks or these really big monster units, you kind of got to get the most bang for your buck, and you're going to get that with Stonehorns, not Thunder Tusks. The Frostlord on Thunder Tusk is pretty much the same. It doesn't do enough for how expensive it is. Next up are Knoblars. Now, Knoblars are a bit weird. Their only saving grace is that they are incredibly cheap for how many models and wounds you get in an army of very expensive units, but they are just bad at everything else. The only kind of good thing about them is their trap ability. So whenever you charge a Knoblar unit, once the enemy finishes the charge, you roll dice for every Knoblar unit that is within 3 inches of the enemy, and a 6-up you deal D3 mortal wounds. This is really powerful and annoying. Not the most likely thing to go off, but considering you get 20 dudes per reinforced rank, you can potentially roll a lot of dice and fish for a lot of mortal wounds. It's just kind of a little bit of something your opponent will have to think about, and it might catch them off guard because they're just like, oh, I'll just charge this Knoblar unit and get rid of it. But you'll do a little bit of damage back to them once they charge. So that's probably the only thing to keep in mind for the Knoblars. Gorgers. These guys, besides being really gross, their only upside is that they can deep strike. That's it. They are not threatening at all, either defensively or offensively. They have nothing going for them other than they can deep strike. Moving on. Next is the Leadbelchers, which I'm kind of disappointed with. I really want the Leadbelchers to work as a unit. I think they're really fun and flavorful, just kind of this really large fellow shooting a broadside cannon at you. But they're really weak. Like, they only do 1 damage, and you'd think a ship cannon, or the equivalent of a ship cannon, would do more than 1 damage. It's kind of disappointing. I will say they do have a bonus to increase their amount of attacks if they don't move, so they're good if you are using them defensively to hold objectives or otherwise just not moving them. I just really, my biggest kind of gripe with the Noblerslchers is I'm just disappointed. They have so much potential to be a really fun and wacky unit, but just kind of fall hard. Next up are Maneaters. These guys are also kind of odd. They are a hybrid skirmish unit that kind of has some good range and some okay melee. Their unique abilities are interesting. They kind of get a pre-game like big name, I believe it's called. It might be called something else, but they get a unique buff that you can give them before the game starts, and they get to have that for the rest of the game. Most of them are like rerolling ones to hit or wound or run and charge, and I think the last one is no battle shock. So it's an interesting unit. I think it's a little bit hard pressed to find space in an army, just kind of how expensive everything is. But if you like these ogres that are dressing up like ninjas, go right for it. Next up are Ogre Glenns. These are your only default battle line options, so they get some points there. But there are as many other ways to get battle line for the Ogor Mawtribes. The big thing for the Gluttons is they just have no rend. Sure, they do a little bit of damage, but you're not going to get any of that through without any rend. Next up is the Firebelly. Besides having a really cool model, the Firebelly is a wizard, and that's kind of it. That's all he has going for him. His spell is okay. It's like a little bit more of a upgraded arcane bolt. You're going to do D3 damage, and then the unit you target's going to get +1 for your units to hit them. So kind of nice. But the big thing here is gut magic is not all that good. There's not very many good spells. There's a few of them, but being a wizard is kind of, it's not nearly as essential as some other armies. So he only gets a few extra points in my book for being a wizard. Next up is the Slaughtermaster. Besides having a really, really scary and kind of intense model, he has a really good unique spell, some fine, if not random, abilities, and he can actively hurt himself quite a lot when he's dispelling and with the random abilities table. So just something to be aware of. My biggest thing is random abilities are, well, random. You're not going to be able to consistently get the ones you need or the ones you want. So take him with a grain of salt. Next up is the Icefall Hunter. I kind of am a little conflicted on where to put him. He doesn't really do too much. His main things are buffing some good units, deep striking, and being really, really cheap. Initially, I put him in tier 2, but upon further reflection, I think he's probably mid to low tier 3. But I'd like to hear some Ogre player feedbacks on the Icefall Hunter. I personally think he's a little bit better than some people give him credit for due to what he buffs. And the board edge deep strike is always a nice tool, especially with he can pull some sabers with him, so it gives the sabers a little bit more mobility. But yeah, if you have any more comments on the Icefall Hunter, please let me know. Before I move on to tier 2 and above, I'd like to give an extra special thanks to our Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome. It is incredibly amazing to see the support and the growth that this community has achieved. And every day it's always awesome to see how much you guys enjoy my videos. So thank you. If you want to become a part of the Patreon supporters, there's a link in the description, as well as a link to the Discord for another avenue of interacting with me, as well as the community. So I would love to see all of your beautiful faces down in the Discord. Well, without further ado, let's get on to tier 2. Tier 2 starts with the Stonehorn Bistrider. Stonehorns are always a great choice. These are, I think Stonehorns are my pick for the best units in the Ogre roster. The Only downside is that they are expensive, and you can only really afford a few of them. And if you're going to take some Stonehorns, you might want to take the leaders just so they can have leader traits and artifacts and a whole bunch of other stuff. But Stonehorn Bistriders are not a bad choice. Next up are Frost Sabers. This one kind of struck me a little bit out of the blue. I initially thought Frost Sabers were going to be pretty bad, as most War Beast units go, but Frost Sabers are really strong. They are stupid cheap for a fast, dangerous War Beast, and you can buff them up pretty well with an Ice Barrel Hunter. Really, they're great. I think that they have a really unique role. And being very cheap is good. Like, I believe right now they only cost 55 points, so almost the same cost as an extra command point. And you can fit these guys in just to fill up points. If you have kind of an odd number of points remaining and you don't know what to do, throw on a unit of Frost Sabers. Really interesting unit. In a similar vein to the Frost Sabers, the Icefall Yetis are a really good choice. They have a lot of damage and a little bit more tankiness than the Frost Sabers. There's also more of them per unit, but they are expensive. They're a little bit more than double the cost, coming in, I believe, at 120 for 3 models. But regardless, very good unit. Definitely something to consider. So the Iron Guts. These guys are one of the damage units for ogres. They dish out an absurd amount of pain, especially if you are going with a not Beastclaw Raider themed army, so not like the Icefall Yetis, the Frost Sabers, or not some of those guys. Your Iron Guts are going to be where a lot of your damage comes from. So they're your hammer unit, so very, very good. Mournfane Pack. I think these guys are amazing. Definitely my pick for the damage unit for an ogre army over the Iron Guts. I think they are really get there because they are able to keep pace with other big units. They get buffed by some really nice command abilities from the Husk Guard on the Husk Guard on Stonehorn, and they just hurt a lot. Definitely really, really good. The Butcher. So I like the Butcher for his unique spell. It's niche and it's not likely going to do too much, but what it does do is it's kind of like Curse of Years from Arkan, except a little bit worse. So basically you cast it and then like on a 4-up you deal D3 mortal wounds, and then you keep rolling, and if you keep getting 4-ups you're going to keep doing D3 mortal wounds. So potentially a lot of damage, and he's cheap for a wizard. Like I said previously, gut magic is not the best, but having some wizards to throw around arcane bolts or mystic shields is very powerful. The Tyrant. So the Tyrant is a bit weird for me. I think he really serves his purpose as a beat stick unit. You aren't going to really get much out of him other than damage and throwing him into combat. He's got some interesting, unique abilities in the big names, and he's going to be best, or he's going to get the most out of his weapon loadouts against heroes and monsters. Definitely something to consider, though, if you just want a good foot hero to stick alongside your other units. So the Iron Blaster. Upon first looking at this unit, I wasn't all that impressed. I was kind of like, oh, okay, this is a little bit odd. But after looking at it a few more times and a little bit more closely, it's pretty good. It's a versatile artillery unit that you can kind of send into battle if you really wanted to. It's vastly superior to the Noblerslchers, and for what you get, it's only 130 points, which is really, really cheap, I think. Additionally, they are a source of Ren 2 damage for ogres that don't really have that in a lot of places, especially at range. So definitely a good unit. I'm not sure if it belongs in mid to low tier 2, but I definitely think it belongs in tier 2. Last but definitely not least is the Tier 1. There's only 2 units up here. There is the 2 variants of the Frost are the leaders on Stonehorn. The Frostlord is good at damage, being tanky, and he has a pretty good command ability for getting your Morin Fang cavalry into combat by giving them rerolling charges, which is really good. I think that he's probably tied with the Husk Guard and Stonehorn. I think they're both really good. Personally, I would take one of each, and those will be your 2 big points investments in most armies. But that is just my opinion on them. Next up is the Husk Guard on Stonehorn. I think his command ability kind of puts him slightly above the Frostlord. The command ability is super powerful. It gives the Morin Fang cavalry more damage on the charge, which they already get. So it just really gives you a lot more force multiplication, and for ogres, you kind of want to be steamrolling over your enemies. You want to do the damage on the charge, really cripple them, and then keep charging. Just kind of roll through an enemy. And so getting more damage on the charge is going to be really good for ogres. Like the Frostlord, good damage and good tank. So I don't think you can go wrong with the Husk Guard. I think you should always include one if you are planning to go with Morin Fang cavalry, which you should. I think they're a very good unit. So that was the Ogre Mawtribes unit tier list. This was a little bit of an interesting one. Up until this video, I didn't know too much about Ogre Mawtribes. For me, they're a bit niche for my liking. They're definitely an interesting lot, and I can understand why some people enjoy them. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video or want to kind of critique my list, please leave some likes or comments. If you enjoy this type of content, consider subscribing or joining the Discord and the Patreon. And without further ado, I'll see you guys next time.